In the book of Genesis, it talks about a flaming sword that is set to guard the way of the tree of life in the book of Genesis. And this is a prophetic foreshadow of the end times, where we see a scroll of fire. Genesis chapter 3, verse 22 through 24. And the Lord God said, Behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword, which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. Now notice here that it says that this flaming sword keeps the way to the tree of life. And what is the way, the path to the tree of life? The flaming sword is the answer. You see here, this is a scroll, and on that scroll is written on both sides, which is the law. And that scroll is prophesied in the end times. And the law is a fiery law. And that scroll has two edges, both sides. There's two witnesses to prophesy that with two mouths. And that double-edged sword is called distoma in Greek, meaning two mouths. And those two mouths have fire proceeding out of those mouths, thus making a double-edged sword, prophesying the fiery scroll to guard the path for the end times to the tree of life. And if you look, what is the way to the tree of life? Look to the book of Revelation in the prophecy. Revelation chapter 22, verse 14 says, Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city. So we see that you cannot enter into the gates of the city on Christ's return, right? And you cannot partake of the tree of life unless you keep the commandments of God. That flaming scroll, that double-edged sword with fire, is protecting the way to the tree of life. In order to get through the gates, you have to go through the law. In order to get to the tree, you have to go through the law. And this is what the prophecy says in the book of Revelation. And we look in the book of Exodus chapter 3, verse 2 through 4. It talks about the flaming tree of life and the fire of law that is burning through that tree of life, where the Lord was speaking through the tree. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called out of him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. So we see the tree of life with the fire on it, the fire of the law proceeding out. So the Lord was speaking with that double-edged sword, that flaming sword, out of the tree of life, the flame of fire, which is the fiery law. Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 2 through 4 says, And he said, The Lord came from Sinai and rose up from Seir unto them. He shined forth from Mount Paran, and he came with 10,000s of saints. From his right hand went a fiery law for them. Yea, he loved the people, all his saints are in thy hand, and they sat down at thy feet. Every one shall receive of thy words. Moses commanded us a law, even the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. So what was delivered to Moses through that bush? 10 Commandments, the law, that has two sides, written on both sides. 2 tablets with writing on it. Exodus chapter 31, verse 18. And he gave unto Moses, when he had made an end of communing with him upon Mount Sinai, 2 tablets of testimony, tables of stone, written with the finger of God. So we see here that the 2 tablets, the law of God, both was written with the fiery law. And that's exactly what's in the hand of Christ in the end. In Revelation chapter 5 says, And I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within, and on the backside sealed with the 7 seals. And what's written on both sides of the scroll that's delivered to the Son is the law, written on both sides. two edges, this side and that side. It's a double-edged sword. Revelation chapter 1, verse 16. And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp two-edged sword. And his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. We see this flaming sword coming out of Christ's mouth. And this is the same flaming sword with the 2 edges that is from the beginning set in the Garden of Eden to protect the way of the tree of life. Genesis chapter 3 verse 24 says, So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. So what we see is a flaming sword coming out of the mouth of God, a double-edged sword. The scroll, the flaming scroll of fire. And this is what is seen, the law, the burning fiery law that proceeded forth from his mouth, where he sends 2 prophets to prophesy, a distoma, a double edge, with fire coming out of their mouth. Like it says in the book of Revelation, chapter 11, verse 5. Fire cometh out of their mouth and devoureth their enemies. And this is all the prophecy of what's going to be fulfilled throughout the 1260 days. The earth is going to see the law and the plagues that are written in the law prophesied upon them for their disobedience and violations of the law. This will come because the disobedient earth is going to fall under judgment, and the Lord judges by his law. And this is the prophecy that will be prophesied from the scroll for those 1260 days, as it is written. And this is the prophecy of the scroll of fire.